I get into talking about Georgia equality, and I am going to talk about Georgia equality and some of the work that we do. I'm also going to start off with just what I call a very brief history of LGBT advocacy and activism here in the United States, because I find a lot of people don't know that. And I think that in order to get where we want to go, I think it's important that we know where we've been. What are the steps that have led us up to this point? And to really start off with that, I think it's important to make it a little personal and to let you know a little bit about me and my coming out process, and the importance of having supportive friends, family members in being able to become accepting of myself. So I grew up in Colorado, went to school in San Antonio, Texas. I came out to myself when I was a freshman in college, and actually that's where I started my advocacy. A friend of mine tried to commit suicide, and luckily he was not at all successful. And so he and another friend of mine, what they decided to do is, instead of shying away from the fact that he had tried to kill himself, they wrote a letter, an open letter to the campus community about why he, as a young gay man, felt that he had no support, felt that he had no place in the college campus, and was afraid to come out to his friends, his family. Again, this was 1983 when this happened. And while I think things have certainly progressed a lot, to the person coming out, it doesn't matter. Everybody still has to go through that process of finding themselves and herself. And so they wrote this open letter to the campus community, and within a few short weeks, we had formed our first gay and lesbian student group on our college campus. In those days, the concept of a gay-straight alliance, which is how we basically know them today, was not a concept that anyone really thought of in the early 80s. We were gay and lesbian students. We came together for support primarily, and that's actually what we called ourselves, was the Gay and Lesbian Support Group. The name, of course, has changed over the years to now the Gay Straight Alliance at the college campus. But back then it was the Gay and Lesbian Support Group, because it was just us coming together with a few faculty members, a few staff members, to realize that we weren't alone. And we would be structured with one business meeting every month and one social activity every month, because it was important to have social activities as well. But back then, and this is where the concept of a gay-straight alliance was so foreign, I remember often trying to get my straight friends, who were very supportive of me in terms of coming out. I didn't have a lot of bad experiences, but I tried to get them to come not just to the social events, but to the business meetings, so that they could learn about things like this new disease called AIDS that we were just learning about in 1983. My straight friends wouldn't come. They would say, why would you want us there? What could we possibly learn by going to a meeting of gay people? And I always thought that that was a little sad. And that's actually a lot of what drove my early advocacy and activism. I started off very much doing HIV education and work. I ran our speakers bureau and would go out and speak to my fellow classmates and answer their questions about what it was like to be young and gay in San Antonio, Texas. And inevitably, someone would ask some version of the question of, why would you choose to be gay knowing that you're probably going to die of AIDS? And my answer back then was, well, it's a sexually transmitted disease. I'm learning all I can about it. I feel that I'm actually pretty safe. I'm assuming that most of you are sexually active. What are you doing to protect yourselves? And again, 1983, 1984, 1985, what would happen in every single class when I would ask that question back to them, they would laugh. Because the concept of heterosexual people being concerned about HIV was considered a joke back then. And I couldn't believe that people would let their own ignorance put their health at risk. That people would let their own fear of the unknown stand as a barrier to educating themselves, to protect themselves first and foremost, but also to be there for their other friends. Because in the mid-'80s, there were no government programs to educate on HIV and AIDS. There were no college programs to educate on HIV and AIDS. We had to do it ourselves. And we took that mission and challenge very, very seriously. But we wanted to share this information with other people. And I was constantly amazed at how people would let their own fear and ignorance stand in the way of just learning, and learning things that would help them and help the people that they love the most. On my college campus, we, of course, formed this student group, and the local newspaper picked up on it. And one of the members of the board of trustees saw in the newspaper one day that there was this gay student group on campus. And so he called the president of the university, and he said, Trinity University is a fine, upstanding institution. We're very proud of our Presbyterian heritage, and I don't believe that there's actually gay students on campus. This newspaper article must be incorrect, so what are you going to do about it? And the college president called us into his office and said, boys, just need to let you know that the group is no longer going to be official. You can continue to meet, but you can't use the words gay and lesbian. In fact, for the next 3 years, one of the co-founders, his name was David, it was called David's birthday party. We would check out the rooms to be able to use on the college campus. It was David's birthday party. For the first year or so, this is what we did because we thought that the support was important. And so if we had to go through that indignity of being David's birthday party and kind of hide and lurk in the shadows, we would do that. But you know, after a little while, that got a little old. So we actually started a student movement where we would go to all the student groups on campus and meet with them and say, you know what, they did this to us, violated their own university policy to just arbitrarily cancel our group, one board member, one phone call. What's to prevent that from happening to your group? And before we knew it, the student senate had launched an investigation, and they actually took it very seriously. It was actually helping a history professor at the university last year actually write the story of this, and so I pulled out those documents. They did an incredible investigation. And what they came up with was that there was no legal reason in terms of the policies of the campus at the time for them to have canceled the group. And looking at the religious beliefs at the time, that there really was no reason religiously that the school, even though it was not actually a Christian school, it did have an association with the Presbyterian Church, that the views within many Christian denominations in the early 80s were beginning to change, and there were conversations going on about the role of homosexuality in the Christian church, as well as in the Jewish faith. And that they felt that actually support for students was very important. And so the student senate actually took a vote that we should be an official university organization. And they stood behind us. Then slowly the other student groups started to come on board. And they too felt that we should have a right to exist. And by the time I graduated, my senior year, we actually had created this entire university-wide movement where all of the students had backed the gay and lesbian support group and our right to exist. And it took a few years, but it was so wonderful to have these students, friends, and peers that were willing to stand behind me as I fought for my own right to just meet with my friends, to learn and educate and find support. So that's why I think a group like PFLAG can be so incredibly important. Because through this coming out process that we all go through, I think that that's the one universal thing for folks who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, is that coming out process. We come from all different religious, ethnic, racial, and economic groups. So we don't have that in common. What we do have is this experience of coming out. And when you first start to come out, the thing that you're most afraid of is, how are people going to react to you? Especially, how will your family, your parents, and your closest friends react to you? So again, I love PFLAG because you give us all hope. As you come to accept yourself, your family, your children, you accept our community, and it gives us all hope for a better world, that we can all be accepted for who we are and judged for what we do, not who we love. So that's just a little bit about me and my own coming out process. To kind of move on, like I said, looking at the history and the whole coming out of a community of people. So what makes us an LGBT community? The way I look at activism, and this is what I do, this is kind of what I've always done. I think activism and advocacy are incredibly important because it's not enough to just make a safe space for me as a gay man. I have to help make safe spaces for other people who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. I need to make a safe space for kids who are questioning. I need to make a safe space so that we can have proper HIV education so that people won't end up being infected with HIV in the future. It's important that I help create space for families who just want to live their lives. Adopt kids, live in the suburbs, have a job, go on vacation, make medical decisions, pass along property inheritance, things that people take for granted every single day, that those of us in the LGBT community think we have. But unfortunately, in times of crisis, we realize too often we don't. We don't have those legal protections. Teachers are afraid to talk about us and our families in schools. And many institutions are afraid still today of how to integrate LGBT folks into the workforce, into religious life. So that's why advocacy and activism are so important. So what does it look like here in this country? I like to say that Stonewall is what many people think of, Stonewall riots in New York City in 1969, as the birth of the gay rights movement here in this country. It's an important turning point, but it's certainly not the birth. And so the way I like to start is that actually, to the best of my research that I've been able to find, the first raids on gay bars in New York City occurred in 1900. So it's a perfect place to start. A little more than a century ago was the first time that gay bars were raided.